Once upon a time, there was a small village nestled among mountains and lush green valleys. On the edge of the village lived a shepherd named Salim. Day and night he wandered through forests and pastures with his flock of goats, but deep inside he carried a heavy burden. Poverty had gripped his life. He had neither a proper house nor any reliable means for even 2 meals a day. His mother was old and sick, and the weight of the household rested solely on Salim's shoulders. Often at night, when the villagers were sound asleep, Salim would sit under the flickering lamp and pray, "O Allah, you are my only support. I am weak. You are my helper." Tears would fill his eyes, and a strange peace would descend into his heart. Yet the chain of hunger and sorrow never broke. One day, a dervish came to the village. His eyes shone with a radiant light, and his face reflected tranquility. Sitting in the courtyard of the mosque, he was teaching people to place their trust in Allah. Salim also came there. Listening to the dervish's words, his heart found comfort. The dervish said, "My son, if hardships increase, give charity. Charity wards off misfortune and brings blessings into your sustenance from Allah." With a trembling voice, Salim said, "Hazrat, I have nothing to give. I myself go hungry." The dervish smiled and replied, "My son, charity is not about wealth but intention. Even if you give a single morsel to a hungry person or place your hand gently on the head of an orphan, that too is charity." These words struck Salim's heart like lightning. He silently vowed that no matter what, he would never abandon kindness and charity. The next morning, while grazing his goats, a hungry traveler came to him and said, "Son, I have been starving for many days. Do you have anything to eat?" Salim had only a piece of dry bread, which he had saved for his mother, but he remembered the dervish's advice. With tears in his eyes, he placed the bread in the traveler's hands and said, "Brother, please pray that my mother does not sleep hungry tonight." Tears rolled down the traveler's eyes as well. He ate the bread and prayed, "Son, may your sustenance never run out." An indescribable peace filled Salim's heart, but he did not know that this single morsel was about to change his destiny. Yet destiny had something else in store. From that day on, a spark of goodness was lit in Salim's heart. Despite his poor condition, he began to do small acts of kindness. Sometimes he would give goat's milk to an orphan child. Sometimes he would carry firewood for an old man. The villagers were astonished that this poor shepherd, who himself suffered from hunger, could spend on others. But now a strange light began to shine on Salim's face. One day Salim took his goats to the pasture. Suddenly one of his goats ran toward the forest. Salim ran after it. The goat stopped among the bushes. When Salim pushed the bushes aside, his eyes widened in amazement. There lay an old clay pot, half buried in the ground. He pulled it out, opened the lid, and found shining gold coins inside. Salim's heart began to pound. He looked around nervously, then lifted his head toward the sky and said, "O Allah, is this your blessing or my test?" Tears flowed from his eyes. In his heart, there was also fear that this wealth might mislead him. He immediately went to the village imam and told him the whole story. In a calm voice, the imam said, "My son, this is a gift from Allah. You fed others despite your hunger. You placed your hand on the heads of orphans. Allah has rewarded you for that. But remember, this wealth is also a test for you. If you waste it on pride and extravagance, it will only bring loss. But if you spend it in the way of goodness, both your worldly life and your afterlife will prosper." With a determined voice, Salim said, "Hazrat, I promise that I will spend this wealth on serving my mother and in the path of Allah." Within just a few days, the villagers were astonished. The same poor shepherd who once survived on scraps of dry bread was now arranging food for orphan children, delivering provisions to widows' homes, and repairing the mosque. Yet, despite all this, his simplicity and humility remained the same. Whenever his mother saw all this, tears would fill her eyes, and she would say, "Son, This is the blessing of your charity. Allah saw your intention and blessed you." Kissing his mother's feet, Salim would say, "Ammi, this is all Allah's mercy. I am nothing." But the treasure of wealth could not remain hidden from everyone's eyes. A few greedy villagers who once considered Salim insignificant now burned with envy at his prosperity. In their hearts grew the thought that if this treasure came to them, their fate could change too. One night, while Salim was sleeping beside his mother in their home, those very villagers quietly gathered at his door. In their hearts burned conspiracy, and in their eyes blazed the fire of greed. But they did not know that destiny was about to take another turn. The night was deep and dark. With gusts of wind, the branches of the trees swayed, and the doors of the mud houses creaked. Salim's mother was fast asleep, while he himself lay on his bed absorbed in prayers. Suddenly, he heard a noise at the door. Fear stirred in his heart, but he quickly composed himself and said, "O Allah, you are my protector." Outside stood 4 men from the village, whose hearts were filled with the darkness of greed. They slowly opened the door and entered. Salim stood up and looked at them in astonishment. One of them stepped forward and said, "Salim, we all know you have found a treasure. Hand it over to us, or the consequences will be dire." But Salim's face showed not fear, but peace. He said softly, "Brothers, this treasure is not mine. It is a trust from Allah. If you wish, then come. Let us spend this wealth in the way of Allah. Let us give it to orphans. Let us feed the hungry." But their eyes were blinded by greed. One of them said harshly, "Don't preach to us about goodness. We want the treasure." They were about to move forward when Salim's old mother awoke. In a trembling voice she said, "Fear Allah. This boy belongs to your own village. Do not snatch away his right." But they did not stop. One shoved the mother, another lunged toward Salim. Instead of fear, a strange courage rose in Salim's heart. He cried out loudly, "I will not give you this treasure. It belongs to the orphans and the needy." The matter reached the point of scuffle. Hearing the noise, some villagers awoke and rushed toward Salim's house. As the thieves were about to be caught, they panicked and fled into the darkness. But before leaving, they gave this threat, "Salim, remember, this matter will not end here." After this incident, the village imam and elders gathered everyone. The imam said, "Listen, this treasure was given to Salim by Allah because despite his hunger, he fed others. If you covet his wealth, Allah's wrath will descend. Remember, sustenance increases by sharing, not by snatching." The good people of the village surrounded Salim and stood by his side, but those with greedy hearts were not ready to back down. They began to plot new schemes in secret. Salim would graze his goats during the day and at night sit by his mother, praying to Allah, "O Allah, keep me steadfast. Do not let me be arrogant over this wealth, and protect me from the evil of my enemies." His mother would place her hand on his head and say, "Son, do not be afraid. The blessing of charity will protect you from every hardship." But this blessing was now about to turn into a great trial. A few days passed in peace, but a strange unease settled in Salim's heart. Whenever he went toward the pasture, he would see some shadows moving behind the bushes in the distance. Sometimes at night, the sound of footsteps would be heard near the house. He did not trouble his mother with it, but quietly thought to himself, "Those are the same people after the treasure." One evening, the noise of the village children was heard. The running children brought news that a caravan was being looted by bandits in a nearby mountain pass. Salim's heart pained. He took a few close friends with him and went there. The scene was horrifying. The caravan's travelers were screaming, women and children were crying. The bandits were stealing valuable goods. Salim told his friends, "We are few, but it is our duty to fight for what is right. If we remain silent, this tyranny will grow." His friends, trembling, said, "Salim, they are armed. We have nothing." Salim looked toward the sky and said, "Allah is great. If the intention is true, help comes on its own." Then he moved toward the bandits. He shouted, "O oppressors, leave these weak people alone. This is not your property." The bandits laughed loudly and mocked, "Has this poor shepherd come to stop us?" One stepped forward, waving his sword, and said, "Move aside, or you will lose your life." At that moment, Salim bravely picked up a stone and threw it. It struck the bandit's hand, and the sword dropped. His friends also found courage and created an uproar. Hearing the commotion, more villagers ran over. The bandits realized they would be captured, so they abandoned the goods and fled. The caravan's travelers kissed Salim's hands and prayed, "May Allah keep you safe, son. Today you saved our honor." An old traveler asked, "Weren't the bandits who robbed us from your village?" Salim was stunned but remained silent, thinking to himself that the conspiracy had grown deeper. News of the incident spread through the village like wildfire. Salim's bravery was praised, but the flames of envy in the hearts of the jealous intensified. They were now ready to become open enemies. That night Salim sat beside his mother. She quietly said, "Son, I am afraid they might harm you." Salim held his mother's hand and replied, "Ami, if I remain steadfast on the truth, no power in the world can harm me. Charity and goodness are my shield." At that very moment there was a loud knock on the door. The enemies standing outside shouted, "Salim, today a decision will be made. Either hand over the treasure, or prepare for your life to end." In the dark night that challenge echoed, and the story began moving toward its conclusion. With the knock, an eerie silence spread through the air. The mother's heart began pounding loudly, and she said, trembling, "Son, don't open the door. They are thirsty for blood." But Salim gently replied, "Ami, fear does not befit those who walk on the path of truth. Whoever stands with trust in Allah, what need has he to fear man?" He rose slowly, went near the door, and called out in a loud voice, "Brothers, if you have come for the treasure, then know this. This wealth is not mine. It belongs to Allah. I have dedicated it for the orphans and the hungry." From outside came a burst of mocking laughter. "Enough of your speeches. Give us the treasure, or tonight your blood will be spilled." Salim opened the door. 4 men stood there, holding sticks and knives. Their eyes gleamed with greed, and cruelty was etched on their faces. The mother screamed, "Servants of Allah, do not commit this injustice!" But they did not stop. Salim spoke firmly, "If you wish, you may take my life, but you cannot seize the treasure. This decision I have made in the name of Allah." One of them stepped forward and shoved Salim to the ground. The mother rushed and held her son in her arms. Her trembling voice echoed in the air, "O Allah, protect my son." At that moment, many villagers came running. Hearing the commotion, elders and youths gathered. Together they overpowered the greedy ones. The village imam also arrived. In a voice filled with anger and authority, he said, "For your desires, you intended to spill blood? Have you forgotten that the giver of sustenance is Allah?" With tears in his eyes, Salim stood up and said, "Imam Sahib, I have promised Allah that this wealth will be spent on good deeds. Tonight was a trial for me, but Allah granted me success." The imam turned to the villagers and said, "Look, see the blessing of charity. A single morsel changed this boy's destiny, and today Allah saved him from oppression as well." The villagers decided together that the greedy men would be expelled from the village so others would take heed. Salim said before everyone, "I seek no revenge. Allah's justice is the greatest. I only pray that greed may be removed from their hearts." Hearing this, the villagers were moved to tears. The mother placed her hand on her son's head and said, "Son, today you have not only raised my head with pride, but the honor of the whole village." Thus a poor shepherd, who once struggled even for a piece of dry bread, through the blessings of charity and goodness, not only secured himself, but taught the entire village a lesson of peace and trust. And at that moment, it seemed as though light was showering from the sky, and the whisper of the wind was saying, Whoever gives for Allah's sake, Allah never leaves him empty.